So this is a study that I've been working on with my colleague Dan Newark, and we were interested in learning more about what the American public feels about educational inequities and the test score gaps that often show up between historically advantaged and disadvantaged groups. I think that the clearest, most consistent finding we saw was that there was much more concern about and willingness to address gaps that are wealth-based than gaps that are race and ethnicity-based. So for example, when we asked respondents about the gap between wealthy and poor students, and we asked how much of a priority is it to close the gap, 64% of those respondents said that it is essential or it's a high priority, and that compared to 36% of the respondents we asked about the black-white gap, and 31% we asked about the Hispanic-white gap. We were a little surprised by how people explained the existence of test score gaps, so we adapted a question that's been used by political scientists to understand why people think that inequalities exist more generally in society. And one of the explanations that we offered was about injustices in society and discrimination against the disadvantaged group. And when we asked our respondents about that question, we saw very large percentages of people saying that injustice and discrimination has nothing to do with today's test score gaps. So for example, the group asked about the black-white gap. 44% of them said that injustice and discrimination has absolutely nothing to do with the existence of that gap. And 44% said the same about the Hispanic-white gap. And then there was also a large group that said it has a little to do, but not much. And I think we expected some of those responses, but we may have been surprised that so many people responded in that way. And what we saw is that people were much more inclined to say that it is the parents and students of those groups that are responsible for test score gaps. So I think on one hand, it's sort of hard not to feel a little sad about that and just find that to be an unfortunate finding and a reflection of what the public is thinking. On the other hand, there may be an opportunity there, which is that it could be, and we can't speak to this from our findings, but it could be that if you persuade people that a good part of that achievement gap really is an opportunity gap that's underlying it, and that there is something to that explanation, they might be more inclined to support policies that will close those gaps and sort of more motivated to address the gap. So why does it matter that the public feels differently about gaps between wealthy and poor students and gaps between black, Hispanic, and white students? So one way of thinking about this, and I'm not sure that we think this is the right way, but one way of thinking about this would be that reframing the way that we talk about educational inequality might lead to policies that are sort of more politically viable. So it may be that if the way that we have historically presented educational inequality, which is as a black-white achievement gap, that's sort of the term that we most often see, it may be that there would be more support just by doing a sort of switch in the way that we talk about those things. I think that's problematic for a few ways, not least of which is that those are distinct gaps with very different origins, and they have different meanings, and there are different ways of closing them, and so I don't think it's just a labeling question. It may also be that where we're talking about black-white achievement gap and these other gaps, it may be that the public doesn't think about them in the same ways that we think about them. So for a lot of us, it might seem very natural and obvious that these are important gaps that need to be closed, and there's a fundamental social inequity and injustice that's at their core. It may be that the public feels differently about different types of gaps, and there is some educating that needs to be done around what the black-white and Hispanic Latino-white test score gaps mean and why they exist. And it may be that there's a role for us to play in just getting out there and talking to the public.